Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kat Calvert and I am the workstream lead for Wellbeing for Learning in the Waste Partnership. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Lorna Aitken along today. Lorna is a Senior Education Officer in Education Scotland and is, I know that she won't use the word expert, however, I would say an absolute or very well read on GIRFEC. So I'll pass over. We will be, as I said, we will be recording the meeting. Once I have downloaded it and edited anything out that will make sure everyone is anonymised, I will share the link with you. Lorna, over to you.
Many thanks, Kat, and many thanks to everyone joining the call this afternoon. I know how precious everybody's time is, so really appreciate you taking the time to come along to this session. I think some of the information I'm going to share with you might be very familiar to you, but what I'm also going to do is give you a little bit of an update in relation to the GIRFEC refresh and what that means for you as classroom practitioners as well. There'll be a little bit of reflective thinking and a little bit of provocation in there as well for you to think about what next for yourselves in relation to that. So without further ado, I'll move on to my first slide. And my first question to you is through Menti. And I want to ask you, what is GIRFEC? What does it mean to you? So please feel free to use your phones to use the QR code or use your devices to go to Menti. And the code is there. It's 16848604. And that will take you to the Menti meter. So just really asking you, what does it mean to you? What is GIRFEC to you? And just while we're waiting for people to go into Menti, Mrs. Strachan's asked about notes. Yes, absolutely. We'll be sharing a PDF version of the presentation today. So hopefully there'll be lots of links that you will be able to access and use as well. So hopefully you've all had a chance to sneak into the Menti. So I'll just see if I can shift to my other screen. Give me a second till I get the right one. There we go. Is that one there? Fabulous. So we've got some things coming up just now. We've got, it's child orientated. It's about inclusion. It's about relationships, about understanding. Now there is a way that I can refresh. Oh no, there we go. It's come up itself. Equity underpins your practice. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Definitely does underpin your practice. What else have we got in there? Yeah, inclusion. A lot of people are talking about inclusion in there, about that holistic approach. The child included, collaboration. Okay. Yeah, we'll just give another wee minute. Shared language. Yep, I like that too. And good to see that inclusion is definitely coming out nice and large in the screen there in relation to what we think GIRFEC is or what we know about GIRFEC ourselves. So there's not really anything else coming through at the moment. So Kat, I'm happy to share a version of that once we've, if anybody else wants to add to it, you know, they're more than welcome to afterwards. So there we go. So what does it say though? That's our thoughts around GIRFEC. So we had things like collaboration, inclusion, equity, relationships. What does the refresh actually tell us? What is GIRFEC? So I'm just going to let you have a little minute to have a look through the definition, the new definition within of GIRFEC on the Scottish Government website. And you'll see the link down there at the bottom, which takes you to the new policy statement, some of which that information is the information I'm sharing with you today. But really just to, I guess, highlight some of the key language that we have on there. It's the consistency of the framework. So it's making sure that we all have that same consistent approach when we are supporting the well-being of children and young people. It's about having a shared language, that shared understanding of what we mean by well-being in relation to children and young people. It's about the safeguarding the well-being. So GIRFEC is all about that safeguarding element before we get into that space in relation to child protection. So it's about safeguarding the well-being of children and young people. And then hopefully we're all very, very well versed in relation to the well-being indicators. I'll not get you to all round them off because they're on the screen for you there, but we do have them listed there. And then obviously how that all links into our curriculum as well in relation to our capacities. So there's the definition as you would find it in the new policy statement. But I guess underpinning that, what is the refresh? Because actually we've had GIRFEC now for a considerable length of time in Scotland, and it is sector leading, it's world leading in relation to that whole process of bringing that multi-agency approach and having that consistency and that shared understanding to support the well-being of children and young people. But it has been around for some time. And there was a need for that to be refreshed and for that to be updated for the current context in Scotland. And really for us today, it's really in relation to making sure that we incorporate UNCRC and that we have rights-based approaches at the heart of everything that we do. It takes cognizance of the work around the promise and the first phase of the plan, and also the commitment to eradicate child poverty as listed in the National Performance Framework. So that's kind of where GIRFEC is framed just now. That's what's underpinning the work of GIRFEC in Scotland just now. And again, just that link to the current policy statement there for you. And just really, I guess, to underline that point about that rights-based approach and the importance of making sure that we ensure that we have that right-based approach, that we ensure that children's rights are protected, and that we recognise that the children and young people are the rights holders, and that their human rights are embedded in all aspects of everything that we do. And just that whole point about the policy that we have around it, the law, the decision making, that all of that is taking account of children's rights, and where all children and young people have that voice and that they are empowered to be those human rights defenders, as we sometimes refer them to. And if you haven't engaged with any of the UNCRC and rights-based work that the West Partnership is involved in, then I would highly encourage you to contact Kat in relation to that, because there's some great work going on in the West Partnership in relation to learner participation. So what are the principles that we have underpinning GIRFEC? Well, you can see them up there. We've got a number of different areas that kind of let us see where we are what we are working towards. So we're working together with families, and I know that somebody had mentioned that in the Menti that we had, because it's not just about working with the child, it's about working with the families to ensure their rights are all included and heard. It's understanding their well-being, and that comes down to that bit about the relationship aspect, and knowing the family, having that positive relationship with the child and with the family. It's about understanding differentiation and valuing the difference of ensuring everybody is treated fairly, making sure that we take full consideration of and address any of those inequalities that may be in and around our space that where we're working with children and young people, whether that be in a school or a setting or in the school community. And it's making sure they get the right support at the right time from the right people. And that's kind of fundamental to GIRFEC, that aspect of the right support at the right time from the right people, that multi-agency approach that we have in there. But what does it look like in schools or settings? So I guess taking it right back to our curriculum for excellence and thinking about it in the space of health and well-being, we obviously have our responsibility of all aspects in there. And you will see in here, and I'll just click on this resource to take you to that. If you haven't already seen this resource, it was developed a number of years ago by colleagues in Education Scotland alongside practitioners to really demonstrate the links between UNCRC, GIRFEC and the experiences and outcomes and expectations of responsibility of all. So if I take you to that page just now, you'll see here we've got a number of resources. There's a booklet in here which kind of explains and gives an overview of responsibility of all and the links with UNCRC and GIRFEC. And then what we also have are a number of posters. If you haven't seen these are great. You can like cut them up and use them as displays. You can make them bigger. We actually might even still have some in the office somewhere. We might have some hard copies that we might be able to get a hold of. But you'll see here what they've done is they've broken down each of the wellbeing indicators and given some examples of how that might link to the experiences and outcomes and what that looks like. So they've given some examples what this could look like. And we've got that for all of the wellbeing indicators on there. And then the next page has got a blank version of that so that you in your own school or your own setting can say which of the health and wellbeing experiences and outcomes or otherwise beyond health and wellbeing that you might be linking it to and what that might look like for you in your own setting as well. So depending on the approach or the whole school approach that you're using in relation to responsibility of all, linking GIRFEC and UNCRC, you might want to consider using some of these resources. And as I mentioned, we've got an editable version here. So you'll see that basically you can take now, I think actually, oh, that's taken a little while. You can see that there's full page size versions as well that you can edit for your own schools or your own classroom for each of the wellbeing indicators in there. And then if I go back to the booklet just gives you the overview of how those links are made between UNCRC, how to make it accessible, how to make it manageable, how to make it meaningful, and how to make it work. And then right at the very bottom, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling really quickly through that one, is about evaluating progress, which I'll talk about just shortly as well. Now, if it's helpful, I will pop that link into the chat so that you've got a direct link to that page on the website as well. So going back to that, so yes, so that's basically where it sits within a curriculum and across that, thinking about those whole school approaches as well. So embedding UNCRC, embedding the wellbeing indicators, and ensuring that is the responsibility of everyone in your school or setting to ensure that the child's wellbeing needs are met. And apologies, I did not mean to click on that one there. I meant to click on the next page. There we go. So we've got a little bit of space and time just now. We're not going to go into breakout rooms. What we'll do is we'll just take the chance to use the Jamboard. So what I'll do is I'll just click across the Jamboard once I've explained this task. What we want to do is think about what does that look like? So you've heard about the refresh, about the fact that it's embedding UNCRC, it's that multi-agency approach, it's ensuring we're getting the right support at the right time from the right people. So what's that going to look like for you? How do you do that in your own school or setting? How do you promote wellbeing in your school or setting? And we've got a page on the Jamboard to kind of consider that space. How do you prevent wellbeing issues? How do you prevent that ensuring that the wellbeing needs are being met for your children and young people? And how do we make sure that we provide support? Because that's the kind of targeted intervention aspect of GIRFEC. So for our promotion of wellbeing, preventing wellbeing issues really is in our kind of universal space of supporting the wellbeing of children and young people, like what we've heard in relation to responsibility of all. But then we want to be considering that targeted intervention and those targeted support. So what does that look like? So I'm just going to click. Oh no, in fact, I better give you the, in fact, if I click on the link, I can get to the Jam, can't I? Do it that way. And it will let me share. So if I just take that link there, anyone with the link, copy that, pop it in here, then you should be able to go into the Jamboard yourself. So what you can see here, how do you promote well-being in your school or setting? That's on our first page. How do you prevent it? How do you prevent those well-being issues? And how do you provide well-being support in your setting? So what's the GIRFEC process in your school or setting? What do you do? And this is an opportunity really, I guess, for us all, the group that we're in just now, to come in. You can pop your hand up, you can chat, rather than just use the Jamboard, but a real opportunity to share practice, I guess. So how does it work within your school? What does it look like in your local authority? How does that GIRFEC process operate where you are? So we'll just give a little bit of time for thinking around that. And then if anybody wants to come in and talk about, well, what does GIRFEC look for you in relation to promoting and preventing and providing wellbeing support? This is where I really should have had some background music, shouldn't I? A wee bit of thinking time, Kat.
I'm hearing Tony, I'm going to give away my age now. I'm hearing like Tony Hart's Art Corner type music.
You are definitely giving away your age. There'll be many people on this call going, who on earth is Tony Hart?
So obviously I've just seen it in YouTube clips, you know.
Clearly, absolutely. So we've got somebody coming already to tell us they do regular health and wellbeing meetings weekly. Anybody else got anything that you do to help promote wellbeing in your school or setting? And honestly, please feel free to come in, pop your hands up and come on in. You don't have to put your videos on if you don't want to, but even if you come in. And
for this one, what I'll do is I'll edit this bit out of the video, so don't worry, don't think the world is going to see you unless you wish to be a YouTube star.
So we've got another one up, using GIRFEC with our families at initial transition within our care plans. Excellent. So we're starting to talk about the process, that staged intervention kind of process. Anything else that you do to promote well-being? Or some people already going in? Oh, there we go. Yeah, we've got some in under prevention. Anonymous worry boxes to allow children and young people to share issues. Yeah, another good one. And Mrs. Gallagher saying we've got nurture principles embedded throughout classes. Yeah, good. Oh, that first one's disappeared. Daily feeling check-ins. Yep, that's a good one as well. So these are good to help that whole promotion side of it, the preventing wellbeing issues. Having strong and open relationships with families to share concerns and allow them to share any issues with the school. Yeah, and I'm delighted to see, you know, relationships coming through. I honestly cannot emphasize enough the importance of the relationships in relation to supporting the well-being of our children and young people. We've got Rise and Shine Breakfast Club for targeted children coming through as well. Close links with families and support with community development officers. Yep, the importance of working multi-agency and across different supports in our school community. So incredibly important. Using GIRFEC statements within plannings with children so they understand what it means to be healthy, safe, etc. Great, yeah, because I think the more they get used to that language and have an understanding of language, that helps to promote well-being in our schools. Just give it another wee couple of minutes, see if anything else comes through. Breadth and depth of the health and wellbeing curriculum. Definitely. And that should be across all ages and stages. We've got offering safe spaces with clubs during breaks and lunchtime. Just that always having that open door, those opportunities for children and young people to come and talk to people. Really important. So what about the moving on to that providing wellbeing support, that provision of wellbeing support? But actually that provision of potentially maybe even some targeted support. So thinking more about how does that take for them in your school?
We might have lost Lorna.
Not sure if that's somebody. I'm not sure if it's me.
You've frozen a wee bit, Lorna. I don't know if you can hear me. Sometimes when you go off, you can still hear the call. Yep, I'm looking at some of these here. So we've got a third sector working, using WAPs. I'm not sure what WAPs are. I'm assuming it's something like a plan for a child. If anyone wants to expand on a WAP, sorry. Multi-agency working, hugely important. And monthly and staged intervention and inclusion meetings with our learning community. Again, it's that conversation with everyone who's involved. Working with the children and young people. I'm just going to have a quick check in the chat if there's anything else. Are there any specific things that you might do? I know in my own school, I was a primary head teacher before this, and in my own school we had, yep, so there we go, we've got Seasons for Growth has come in. We used to do offer something called Lego. Was it called? No, it wasn't Lego therapy. However, that is something that can be used obviously to target communication skills. We used a program called Build to Express, which I believe has now changed its name, and it's where the children explore feelings and they build their scene with Lego and then explain it. There we go. We've got some more coming in now. We've got paths. Nurture groups and Lego therapy at the zones of regulation. See that coming in now. If anyone wants to come in and talk, please feel free about anything that's worked particularly well. Nurture principles, identifying gaps and providing support in a dignified way. That's extremely important. I've got some coming in now in the chat. Emotion works. Emotion works is really popular at the moment. Really, really popular. Drawing and talking, is that just exactly what it says in the tin, or is that a program, Mrs. Gallagher? I'm imagining it's just it's something along. Lorna's just messaged to say she's trying to get back on. I'm imagining it's something along the lines of art therapy that allows children and young people to... Hello, Lorna.
Hi, sorry about that.
I'm just asking about drawing and talking, whether it's a specific programme or whether it's just what it says on the tin.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Kat. Apologies for that.
All right.
I'm just trying to get my
presentation back up. Sorry.
Oh, Mrs. Gallagher, is that Mrs. Gallagher?
Sorry, as a specific programme that one of our custom improvement teachers is currently running. It's pretty confidential between the child that's been selected and the person who's living. It's just basically what it says. They draw, and whatever they're drawing is where the chat kind of comes from. So it's again for targeted children, and it's been working quite well so far. It's a 10, I think it's a 10 to 12 week programme.
Okay.
It's something different, so it's good.
I always find it's quite good to think outside the box, isn't it? Sometimes something completely different works well.
Excellent. I'm just going to have a wee look back on my Jamboard. There we go, providing support. Oh, there's loads up there now. See what happens. I dip out for 2 minutes and see what happens. That's good. Oh, somebody's using Paths, which is great. You've got the counselling sessions. You've got monthly staged intervention and inclusion meetings. Yep, so loads of different things going on in that space. So sorry I missed part of the conversation there in relation, Kat. Was there anything you picked up on specifically?
I was interested to know about that drawing and talking. We were talking about, I'm just putting one in just now. We were talking about how this one was maybe specific, you know, things that you would put in rather than something in general, just to sort of share ideas here in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just put in that chat and chill groups. That was one that we used to use specifically for age groups, so particularly boys in the upper primary was a good one for them because it didn't sound like anything too heavy for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this kind of sharing of different ideas and the different things that people are doing, I think that's a really useful space to promote the different ideas and different practice that people have in their own settings as well. So go back to the presentation for just now. Please feel free to carry on popping things up on the Jamboard. If we've got time, we'll come back to it at the end. Hopefully my connection stays and I will be with you for the next little while. So I'm just going to move on to that next page. Let me just see there. Yep, so that's really what we've just talked about in there. So what I wanted to do was give you some examples as well. You've had that opportunity to share some of the things that you're doing in your own schools and settings, but I wanted to take a little bit of time just to go through some of the resources, sources, some signposting for you in relation to where you might be able to find some supports in relation to that space around GIRFEC, around that promotion and prevention as well. So a couple of the links that we've got, I've already shared that one with you, the responsibility of all. If you've not come across the Compassionate and Connected Classroom, a really useful resource that really helps to look at building resilience, supporting positive relationships, that whole compassion and empathy. It's a fantastic resource. If you've not seen it already, there are 5 different themes within the resource, and within each of the themes there are about 4 or 5 different lessons that can be used. The whole entire PDF is available, or you can access it under each of the themes, because sometimes the big one's quite large to download all in a winner. We do still have some hard copies of this. I know that in the office in Glasgow. So I know that Kat, I think you were lucky enough to get one, weren't you? You were lucky enough to get your hands on one. So there's one of our resources, and again it's aimed at second level. However, you can adapt it to use it at first level, and it's certainly a really good resource to be using as a transition resource up into secondary. If you've not also seen the RSHP site, some fantastic resources and lesson suggestions in here for each of the levels. And again, really thinking about that whole, looking at the relationship side of that. And obviously we've got resources for learners with additional needs, additional support needs, and also with complex additional support needs as well. So again, and what I really like about this resource too is the fact that it's got clear information for parents and carers as well. So there's information in there for your parents and carers that can be used. A couple of other resources I'll share in the promoting positive wellbeing. So we've got a page dedicated to promoting positive mental wellbeing, which includes a range of professional learning that you can access, some useful links through as a result of COVID, some specifics around that inclusive education, relationship-based approaches, looking at our curriculum, and then some helpful links down at the bottom. So continually updating these resources, so every time you go into them they might look slightly different. One of the other resources which is helpful to share for those of you that might be secondary based, if you've not seen this on eSchool, there are P7 to S1 transition learning sessions, as well as some S1 to S3 learning sessions available in this space, and they are videos that you can be using with children and young people. And again, it's just that whole space to allow the children and young people to think openly about their own well-being and where their own well-being sits. And then we also have, this is just a selection of some of the resources that we have available if you've not seen them before. We've got a wellbeing wakelet, which has a wide range of other signposts and resources in there as well. So a little one-stop shop for you in relation to promoting positive wellbeing. Then moving on to that, preventing those wellbeing issues, and I can't emphasise enough, and I know we've said it a few times already, that it is all about relationships. The importance of knowing your learners cannot be emphasised enough, and that's in your early years, your primary, secondary, those, you know, active schools, anybody who's working in your school and your school community, you know, your catering staff, your janitorial staff, your office staff, everybody really needs to know the children and young people and have an understanding of them, because they are the ones, the first points of contact, who are going to be saying to somebody within your school, you know, such and such was just a wee bit out of sorts today. And it's what you do with that information that is really, really important. So knowing the learners, having the relationship with them so that you have an understanding if something's not quite right, and then most importantly, knowing what to do with that. And what the process is in your school and in your setting as to what you should be doing. It doesn't matter what it is. It is just really important that you pass it on. You are safeguarding the well-being of that individual by passing things on. It's amazing how insignificant it might be, but actually over a period of time, if there's a pattern starts to emerge, if there's different things start to come through, the importance of that process of sharing that information cannot be emphasised enough. So the importance of making sure we pass that on, having those pastoral notes, making sure we've got that chronology, because when it does come to the point where we are maybe thinking about a more structured or a more serious intervention, then the importance of that chronology is vital for whoever, whether it's the school-based or whether it's a multi-agency that is now going to be involved in that process, because they need to be able to dissect that information so that they can see where the patterns are as well. Your school or your local authority might also have a very specific staged intervention process where you might have different levels of wellbeing supports. So there might be the supports that you'll put in at classroom level. There might be other supports as you move through the intervention process that might mean that the wellbeing of that individual, the needs need to be met by somebody else within the school. Or if there's, it might actually be somebody within the school community, such as community learning and development, might be coming in to support particular individuals. And then further on in the staged intervention process, that looking at that multi-agency approach and having that joint support team around that individual. And also really about having that skilled workforce that we know and can recognise and understand what's happening with that child if we are worried about their well-being. So there's lots of professional learning that is available, and West Partnership as well are also engaging with the Keeping Trauma in Mind programme. If you've not engaged with that, certainly worth a look at as well in relation to supporting wellbeing needs. Then when we move into the providing support, again, it's really looking at that staged intervention process within your school, the focus on those, the importance of those pastoral notes, the importance of your chronologies, and also the structures that your school and your local authority has in place to make sure that the wellbeing needs are being met on an ongoing basis, and working with the families. And it's that whole thing about, why do we lift the phone to families only when there's something not going well? Why we're not lifting the phone to families to tell them something is going amazing? And it's incredible the shift in dynamic of relationship you can have with your families just with that shift. It's really, really simple. You know, you might say at the start of a week, I'm going to phone 5 families this week and tell them some incredible news about their child or young person, and the relationship that you will build up as you go along, just by doing that, it's significant. It's significant, and I can see Kat nodding away.
You'll feel good as well, because there's nothing worse than having to be the person that constantly has to phone with the bad news, and especially if it's that person that you do phone regularly with bad news. I think phoning them with good news as well, it's so nice. It's such a you'll walk away with a lovely feeling at the end of that phone call.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the other things I wanted to share with you today, if you've not already seen it, maybe even just a thumbs up to see who's aware of the GMWP or has used GMWP, or thumbs down if you've not heard of it. Who's still with us?
There was one there. I could just see one floating up anyway. At least there's a few.
Oh, that's great. Fabulous. So some people do know about it. Is there any with thumbs down? Are we all thumbs up?
Oh, there's a wee sad face. Somebody hasn't.
Oh, Miss Strachan, I'll give you a very quick overview of this just now, because this very much links in with our GIRFEC and the wellbeing indicators. Okay, a couple of thumbs down in there as well. So the GMWP is basically it's a wellbeing profile, and it allows you to have a snapshot of a child or young person's wellbeing, but it's in relation to their sense of agency, autonomy or affiliation around the self-determination theory. Now you can read more about that from this link that I'm about to share with you just now. I'll pop that in the chat. But basically it uses the wellbeing indicators as the basis for a source of 20 questions. Basically, there's 20 questions that the children and young people do, and it's on Glow Forms. And there we go, that's the one I'm looking for right there. So you can see the wellbeing indicators in there wrapped around the 4 capacities. And as I mentioned there, we've got their sense of agency, which is about their competency and their skills, their sense of affiliation, so that's their sense of belonging to the school, and their sense of autonomy, about how autonomous they feel to be trusted to get on with tasks independently on their own. And then there's also a number of questions in relation to healthy and safe as well. So effectively, we have these 20 questions, which you'll see on the screen just now. It's all via Glow Forms. The average time it takes is less than 5 minutes for the children in your class or across your school to do that. Some schools, what they do is they say that during this one day or during over a couple of days, they want the whole school to do that, so they can capture the well-being needs of the entire school over a couple of days. And basically what it does is there's obviously everybody will, I'm sure, be very well aware of Glow Forms, and you can take out an Excel document. Embedded in this resource is another Excel document where the magic happens. So you effectively take the data within your school Glow form and you transfer it over into another Excel document, and it's where the magic happens, and it will interpret all of the data for you like that. It zaps the data for you and makes it really easy for you to be able to start to interpret that data. And it breaks it down into that sense of agency, that sense of affiliation, and that sense of autonomy and well-being and safe. And if I just, there's a couple of videos on here. So this here is a snapshot, sneaky peek at what where the magic happens, what it looks like. And you can see that it would be really easy to start to visualize what that data looks like, and be able to have a conversation in relation to their well-being and where their well-being needs actually are. And it makes it easier for you as a practitioner in your classroom or across your school to put suggested interventions in place for particular individuals or for the class. And then also the really good thing about the GMWP is that you can then go back to that maybe 6 months, 7 months later, redo the same 20 questions, and you can see if there's been any marked improvement on particular individuals or across a whole class or school. So that's the wellbeing profile, and again, that's a really useful tool, and it quite often flags up some of those children and young people that might be just under the radar in relation to their well-being, because there might be the really obvious ones, but this can flag up certain individuals who are just that under the radar there. Tracy, I can see somebody, you've just popped in. So you currently use GMWP for children to assess their well-being. You've got those pupil-teacher conversations, another really important aspect of GMWP, and you repeat it termly. And track your scores to get the insight into your learners across the year. It's helped shape part of your wellbeing input and interventions, and you love the data. The data is the key bit, isn't it? It's, you know, we've always had data around literacy and numeracy, and how fantastic is it now to be able to have data to support the well-being as well. So another really useful tool that potentially you could be using. Tracy, I don't know if you want to come in and talk a little bit about what you've done with that. There's no pressure, please don't feel you have to.
Hello, to be honest, I just returned back from mat leave, so it was another colleague of myself that was leading on it. However, what I can see is that a lot of our children who perhaps didn't share how they were feeling in relation to their well-being have really come forward in an alternative way. So we've been able to identify target groups of children that would have perhaps been lost in the kind of core well-being programme. And it's allowed us to have lots of early intervention in place, and certainly from looking at the data, we can see improvements across the year of how children are recognising themselves. So it's been really effective and useful for our learners, and also as well our education manager loved seeing the data from an alternative perspective other than literacy and numeracy. So we love it.
Excellent. Oh, thanks so much for sharing, Tracy. Really appreciate you coming in there, because it's incredibly valuable for us to hear that as well from the point of view of how it's been used and the success that we're seeing across different schools across the country, in fact, in relation to looking at well-being. And you mentioned specifically on there about that pupil-teacher conversation. And I think that's the really important part, and a wee bit of the magic about GMWP is the fact that the children start to get an understanding of agency, affiliation and autonomy and being healthy and safe, and they start to use that language and have an understanding about what that means, and how it affects and impacts on their own well-being. And there's nothing like looking at the data with them so that they can determine what the next steps or interventions can be for their class or for groups of individuals, because then they've got the motivation for improvement, because they have been involved in the next steps and what that looks like based on the data that they have in front of them as well. So you can imagine how inspiring it is for the children and young people, as well as it is for our education managers who are looking for the evidence and impact in relation to data. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions in relation to GMWP or that process of support. So I guess really my main message at the moment is around the importance of the fact that GIRFEC hadn't changed. GIRFEC is, you know, still as embedded and as strong as ever, as part of a multi-agency approach in Scotland. So our health colleagues use GIRFEC, social work use GIRFEC, our child protection colleagues, you know, have a knowledge and understanding of GIRFEC. It's a multi-agency approach to supporting the well-being of children and young people in Scotland, and that has not changed. The shift has changed really in the understanding about the rights-based approaches and the understanding about the importance of that multi-agency working together. And just to I guess have a consideration about what that looks like in relation to what universal support is, what targeted support is, and the fact that that is potentially from, you know, your targeted support is not, don't feel alone in relation to having targeted interventions. You know, this is a multi-agency, you know, there's lots of people out there supporting children and young people, and it, you know, it could take you know, a considerable length of time to support that individual. And that might be somebody who's needing that additional support for their learning, or they might be at risk of exclusion, or they might have short or long-term needs. And just also, we've not mentioned this yet as part of GIRFEC, but I think it's important to talk about this in relation to a named person versus a lead professional. So a named person is, I guess a named person is primarily the person either within health or education services, and it's somebody who's known to the child, the young person in the family, who's well placed to develop a supportive, positive relationship with them. And in general, a named person is usually the health visitor up until primary 1, because that would be the main point of contact for families in relation to supporting learner wellbeing. Obviously, early years is slightly different, but at the moment it's a health visitor up to the day that the individual starts in primary 1. In primary, it's usually the head teacher or the deputy head teacher who would have responsibility in relation to that well-being. It would be that person who's got that relationship, knows the child or young person. And in secondary, quite often because of the size of the school, that might be a deputy head or a pastoral support, etc., depending on the terminology that's used within the school. A lead professional is slightly different. A lead professional is when you have got a child's plan in place for the individual. So you've gone through your staged intervention process and you've got to the point of having a child's plan. And the whole point of the child's plan is when that multi-agency approach comes in place. So it's not just about the school involvement. So the lead professional, that's usually agreed by the people who are sitting around the table. It's not always the same person, but there has to be agreement around the table about who that lead person might be. It might be somebody from social work, it might be someone from police, it might be somebody from health, or it might actually be somebody from education. But that's an identified person who's going to be the kind of key contact working with the family. And they're the ones who have got the responsibility for coordinating and reviewing. So that whole process of making sure that review dates are in place, that everybody's got the dates in the diary to come and sit around the table, that we've got all the pastoral notes and updated wellbeing notes about that individual. So there's a very clear difference between what a named person's responsibility is and what the lead person in relation to supporting a child would be. And I think, yeah, I'm going to leave that one. I'm just going to put that up there. But just by way of reminder of the 5 key questions that we should be asking of ourselves in relation to supporting children and young people. So our key 5 GIRFEC questions to support an individual, whether it's going to be supported at school level as part of the intervention or whether it's going to be beyond that with a multi-agency approach. So Kat, clear message from me this afternoon is that GIRFEC's not changed, it's refreshed, the focus is slightly different. The most important thing that we can do is make sure that we're sharing experiences and we're sharing good practice across our communities, whether that's within our local authorities or across regional spaces, as we're doing today, to enable us to pick up really good ideas that potentially we can implement in our own session, in our own schools and settings as well.
Thank you very much, Lorna.